In economics, we like to assume that people are rational. And that's one of the biggest downfall in all these models that we create, because people are the most irrational being in the world. People have biases, we have assumptions, and that's why we're so easily influenced and so easily manipulated. Remember last episode, in episode 3, we talked about how digital ecosystems are a closed loop system, and that's where we get to engineer the incentives towards this common outcome and common collective goal that we want. How do we do this though? That's the million-dollar question. We do this in 2 steps. I call them the 2 different layers. In the first layer, we design things in a more hard-coded, algorithmic, classical economic sense. You look at what to optimize, you look at your cost-benefit analysis, opportunity cost, supply, demand, and financial engineering, all that kind of stuff. In the second layer, we're looking at behavioral economics. How can we influence people's behaviors and actions towards the desired outcome that we want? So, in this episode, we'll talk about 3 things. First, what is behavioral economics? 2, why are we like that? Why are we so prone to influence? And 3, how can we apply behavioral economics into token economics? This is the podcast series called Economics Design, and in this series, we'll want to talk about how to design a virtual ecosystem, and we're going to chat with various case studies and also interview different people that is related to designing virtual economies. More generally, we'll just talk about the economics design of digital systems. It can be blockchain related, it can be frequent flyer points, or it can be esports. So let's begin. What's behavioral economics? Behavioral economics is a field in economics research. It studies the effects of social norms on individual psychology, on economics decisions. It's all about making decisions. You realize that economics is in general, how do we make decisions based on the constraints that we have, based on the resources or information that we have. But that's just the tangible side. That's just the things that we can say and we can see and we can quantify. There's also a different side where the social norms, the cultural behavior, the psychological effects, this psychological stuff, this a bit more fluffy stuff, you can't really quantify them so easily. That is all that we're researching about in behavioral economics. In classical economics, we like to assume that everyone is rational, that people are always making the best decisions based on their interest, which is not wrong, but it's also limited, and that's why we have behavioral economics, where we study why people are illogical or why do they behave like that. So, for example, something that is being talked about for maybe a month now is toilet papers. Everyone is being locked down, you can't go out, you're quarantined, everything is shut and all that kind of stuff. So what's the logical thing to do? The logical thing is to go out and buy, 2 weeks worth of food when the pandemic is happening. That's logical. But what's illogical? What's irrational? It's to buy endless rolls of toilet papers because our butt needs cleaning. So here are some possible answers. To quote something from Deborah Small, she's a psychologist who studies consumer judgment and human decision-making at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. So she said that the thing about panic buying is that it gives us a sense of control at a time that we are lacking that. And when we hear people saying that other people are buying something, you just think, oh shit, I need that too. And then it spirals out of control. So I would say, if I could quantify them into 3 different reasons, I'm pretty sure there's going to be so much more, but 3 reasons to explain why we are behaving so illogically and just hoarding a lot of toilet papers. Firstly, people compare, and when everyone is doing it, they're more likely to want to do it. It's herd mentality, basic herd mentality. The second thing is that people don't know what they want until they see it in context. So everything is relative. We don't have an internal skill of defining value. So when we see that there's less toilet papers in the supermarket shelves versus a lot of food, a lot of rice and noodles and eggs on the shelves, then we're more likely to want to buy toilet papers because everyone there's just nothing left when everyone buys it. So you're just afraid and you just go and buy them. So the irrational side is more interested in toilet papers. And lastly, to make people desire something, making the thing very difficult to attain just overrides the logical side. So toilet papers were literally out of stock. You have Costco in the US rationing out toilet papers that you can buy. You have in Australia, the malls in Australia, where there are guards literally with guns standing outside the toilet paper area, so that they make sure no one is stealing them or no one is overbuying them. And because it becomes like a prized good, it becomes so precious and so difficult to attain that everyone just wants to buy them. So these are, three basic reasons to explain why probably we went out of rationality. We stopped thinking logically because there are a lot of social norms that are affecting our behaviors. In behavioral economics, there are three themes. You have heuristics, framing, and market inefficiencies. One of the founders, or one of the founding professors of behavioral economics is Daniel Kahneman, and he wrote this book, which is very good. I recommend all of you to read, called Thinking Fast and Slow. In the book, he introduced two types of thinking systems in our head. System 1 thinks fast, and system 2 thinks really slow. Humans are not only illogical, but we are super lazy. Would you rather watch an hour of Netflix just aimlessly scrolling and aimlessly watching, or would you rather spend that hour of time solving a very difficult mathematical problem? You're probably going to choose Netflix. Don't worry, it's not your fault. Because humans are just lazy. Our brains are lazy. We just want to find a shortcut. It's not just our brains, even in computer systems, when we look at how information in ones and zeros are being transferred from nodes to nodes, this information will always choose the path of least resistance. It's the same way. So we're lazy, we always want to find a shortcut. Now, what happens to this shortcut? Remember, we have two thinking systems, the very, very fast one and the super slow one. So when our brains are super lazy and we want a quick shortcut, so we start to generalize a lot of systems. We like the easy way, so we will learn from experience, and then we just build a mental shortcut in our head. So instead of every time we approach a similar situation, we don't have to use our system 2 to think slowly and analyze everything. We just use system 1, which is a mental shortcut, and apply to it. So it becomes like a shortcut or a rule of thumb. You know how you can customize commands on Siri or Alexa or Apple iPhone now? It's the same thing. Our brain also does the same stuff. So we can conserve our energy when we need to think more, when we need to use our brains more. That's good, right? I mean, on one hand, it's very good. We have technology all around us to help us to conserve our energy so that we can use them in the ways where we really need them. But at the same time, it's also not so good because 95% of our decisions come from this shortcut tool. And these shortcuts, they don't take in new information that's being given to make the right decision. Number 2 is framing. The world's a very, very complicated place. Things are super difficult to understand. How does the internet work? How does emails work? Why can I send emails this way? How does fax machine work? What the hell is Bitcoin? Why is the government doing what it's doing? What does S&P means? What is the central bank doing the right thing? What are all these financial structured products that's out there? It's very complicated. So humans, we don't really like so many complicated things. So what do? We have anecdotes, we have stories, we have stereotypes. They're not the best analogy, but it makes something complicated easier to understand, easier to digest, and it just makes it a little bit more simplified for us to make decision. And most of the time, we don't come from a place of malice. We just want to make the world a little bit simpler for us to understand things. So they also become a mental filter for us to understand. When we're taking in so much information every single day, these framing help us to categorize the information, help us to simplify the information, digest them, and take them in so that we can use these knowledge as decision-making tools in the future. So think of Instagram filters. It's a set of fixed filters that is applied to our faces, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes we end up with weird glitches. Our brains are being super lazy, or our brains are just very lazy. So we apply these filters. Sometimes glitches happens, and we make illogical decisions. So what does that mean? When we have heuristics and framing, it usually creates market inefficiencies. What are market inefficiencies? When things are priced wrongly, or when we make illogical decisions, for example. So when the market is not efficient, it's not at the optimal, it's not at the optimization level that it should be. So that's where market inefficiency comes in. So all these kind of stuff aside, why study behavioral economics? There's a lot of things to study in economics already, and in psychology also talks a lot about, trying to understand people, why they do what they do. So why do we study behavioral economics? In economics, we like to predict things, or we like to do some form of forecast with some level of confidence so that we can make the best decision. With classical economics, we assume that people are rational. They're logical, they will make the right decision. Turns out, not really, they're not like that. So with behavioral economics, we can predict people's irrationality that defy the economic theory, and then we can have better confidence in our predictions and with our models. So basically, we want to study behavioral economics so that we can predict better. Simple. How? There are a few ways, but one way is called prospect theory. We evaluate options based on alternatives. Let's say I tell you that I'll give you 100 followers on your LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever social media that you use. The value of that 100 followers depends on how many followers you currently have. 100 is an absolute value, but the feeling of 100 or the feeling of the additional 100 people can vary a lot psychologically, depending on your reference point. For example, person A could have 500 followers, and person B has 10,000 followers. And the feeling of adding this new 100 people or new 100 followers is going to be very different. We experience different sensitivity of change in the followers. So the person with 500 followers might feel that, there's 100 followers going to be following me because they really appreciate and love my content. I feel so much more excited about this 100 followers. Compared to 10,000 followers, and you get 100 people following you, it's like, no, doesn't really affect me so much because the needle doesn't move so much. So, if you don't remember anything so far, just remember that decisions are reference dependent. We need references to evaluate outcomes. People don't evaluate things objectively. 100 is a fixed number. It's an absolute value, but people don't view this 100 followers in an absolute term. They always reference it to where their starting point is, how they start counting. 500 followers to 600 followers is a huge jump. 10,000 followers to 10,100 followers, not so big jump. People are happier when the difference is smaller than when the difference is too huge. So 500 to 600, the difference is smaller, so they're happier compared to, it's more significant, okay? And from 10,000 to 10,100, the difference is much smaller, it's less significant, so they're not as happy, as excited. So why are we like that? Why are we prone to influence? We have two levels of thinking. We have our rational mind that tells us, no, I don't need to buy another roll of toilet paper. But we also have the more primitive, gut reaction that says, well, better be safe than sorry. I don't want to have no more toilet paper. I just want to make sure that I have a lot of toilet paper just in case, because there's not going to be toilet paper anymore for the next 2 years. So herd instinct can also kick in at this time, where people just suspend judgment and start doing what everyone else is doing. So if someone is panic buying, everyone else will follow suit. Heuristics influence our choices that can be irrational or counterintuitive. So we need help to make better decisions. And we are prone to influence in 6 ways. Reciprocation, social proof of consensus, authority, liking, scarcity, and commitment and consistency. So none of these make logical sense, but hey, we're not so logical, right? Let's start with reciprocation. When someone does a favor for you, you're more likely to return the favor someday. For example, in crises like this, China sends doctors to Italy to help with the pandemic. I am very, very certain that this action will be reciprocated by Italy to China someday down the future. The second is social proof and consensus. If you're in the blockchain space, are you sick of the word consensus? Consensus just means something that the mass agrees to. It is also a form of social proof. If everyone agrees to something, it's more likely to be right. For example, if the WHO, the government of major countries think that the virus requires a lockdown and a huge pause on the economy,
other countries are likely to follow suit and agree that that's the right course of action. I'm not saying this is an irrational thing to do so. I'm just saying that we're easily influenced by the actions that most people agree to. With authority, I've noticed this pretty much early on in my life. I've been to many events and conferences where the speaker is an older Caucasian dude talking about things, and people just believe him. Which, sometimes it's true. He says the right things. But sometimes the information is not right, and I stand up to correct the information. It always starts with the look of, who do you think you are, young Asian female? But when you have coherent points and arguments being made, the audience start to view me with more authority. And we think with our fast brain called System 1, and then we apply the stereotypes that we had previously, which is fine. I'm used to it. It's okay, as long as one is open to changes and be aware of the fast thinking that we have. Number 4, liking. Believe it or not, people like beautiful looking people and people who are similar to us. Model selling us something will influence our want to purchase it more than some random ugly person on the street. We also like people who are similar to us because familiarity is something that we all love. That's why nostalgia sells, and we end up getting influenced easily that way. Number 5, scarcity. We simply want something more just because we don't have it. Why is Bitcoin so sought after? There will only be 21 million Bitcoins in existence. Is there a real purpose of Bitcoin other than being a digital asset for investment or for speculation? Maybe? Who knows? I'm not here to speculate. But we are so influenced and captivated by the idea of scarcity that you need to own something that other people have or other people don't have just because you can own it. And who is the best example of this? Supreme. And everything that Supreme sells. They sell scarcity, and people are influenced to buy $100. People are influenced to pay $100 for a brick, like literally a brick with the word Supreme on it, because it's scarce. There's only so many bricks with Supreme logo printed on it. And lastly, number 6, commitment and consistency. We're more influenced by someone consistent in their message. For example, Bernie Sanders and his message during his lifetime career of being a politician. A commitment by Sanders as he campaigns the same message all the time. So we're more influenced by people who are committed and consistent to what they say and believe in.
Part 3. How do we apply behavioral economics into token economics? Firstly, I talked about how designing ecosystems or designing economics comes in 2 layers. You've got layer 1 and layer 2. Layer 1 is what I call systems architecture. It looks at all the nerdy stuff that can be coded in algorithms or hard-coded in the system. The framework is available at economicsdesign.com, and it's available in a research paper. I talked about this many times. So we have 3 big pillars. You have market design, mechanism design, and token design. Based on these, you have stuff that can be hard-coded, can look at different algorithm. This is where a lot of people like to talk about machine learning and AI. You can do everything you want. It's just a bit more nerdy, a bit more scientific. Layer 2 is where it gets interesting. It's where we can apply more behavioral economics here. Layer 2 is game design that embeds behavioral economics into the experience. So think of user experience plus gamification, and that's layer 2. Let's talk about gamification. How do we gamify systems? So let's say we have let's say we have options. Option 1 is where you can buy a shirt, just a shirt, for $10. And option 2 is where you buy just pants for $15. And option 3 is where you get both a shirt and pants for $15. What would you buy? You're probably more likely to buy the third option, because you get both items at the price of just pants. So you get a good deal. And that's not just because the prices, but price-wise, people rarely choose items in absolute terms. We simply don't have an internal value meter to say, okay, this is how much, this is how much, this is how much. It's easier when things are being compared, or especially similar things are being compared. then you get the internal value. An example in the token space is exchange tokens. Exchange tokens gather its value when traders pay in fiat, crypto, or native exchange tokens. When they get a better deal with exchange tokens, they're more likely to want to get the tokens instead of selling them in the secondary market. For example, it's the BNB token.
Now, moving on to nudge theory, which is also part of behavioral economics. Nudge is a concept that proposes positive reinforcement and indirect suggestions as ways to influence the behavior and decision-making of groups or individuals. Basically, influencing people's independent actions towards the behavior that you want. It's kind of like Pavlov and his dogs. Ring the bell and the dogs salivate. It's a little bit more than that. A classic example is Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. What they do is they attach an image of a housefly into the man's urinal, and man would actually pee at the housefly so that you kind of want to, drown the housefly if you pee. And the cleanliness of the urinal actually went up. So people are not, the guys are not peeing in random places. I don't know, I guess men are not very good at peeing. But it works. It's nudge theory. It's this independent action to want to pee into the urinal, and that's the behavior that you want. So just now we talked about the 6 influence methods: reciprocation, social proof or consensus, authority, liking, scarcity, and commitment and consistency. So let's apply this into designing your token economics, designing your token model, or just designing your ecosystem. So firstly, reciprocation. That means adding value first before extracting value. For example, Crypto.com provides a lot of value add like free Netflix, free Amazon Prime, free Spotify when you sign up with their cards. So that's, you add a lot of value to people. The other one, second, is social proof and consensus. The simplest answer would be Augur, the online betting platform. But that is the business model, so it doesn't count. So let's talk about Bitcoin. Why is Bitcoin so valuable? Almost all crypto people that I know have their assets in Bitcoin. And the social proof is strong. When the prices of Bitcoin fell on 16th March 2020, instead of liquidating more and just running out and abandon Bitcoin, social media was asking everyone to purchase more since prices are so low. And that consensus brought prices of Bitcoin up again in 24 hours. 3. Authority. Authority comes from the background of the founders, the experience, educational background, and street cred in the space. This is most evident in blockchain projects by academic professors. For example, you have Professor Silvio Micali, who founded Algorand. A lot of these blockchain platforms are founded by these very knowledgeable academic professors who bring in a lot of authority into their projects, and as a result, they raise quite some funds. Number 4, liking. I still find this quite funny, but in Asia, you see companies hiring pretty females to model their crypto projects. I saw that in London, let's say in early 2018, and in 2020, I still see that in Southeast Asia. I don't know, somehow it just works. So according to plenty of my male friends in the space, these girls do a very great job at influencing males to sign up for their projects. So liking girls helps you influences people in a very easily. Number 5, scarcity. We simply want something because we can't have it. So following Bitcoin's path of limited supply, every other project has a capped supply of tokens to induce scarcity. I mean, scarcity is one way to go, but scarcity alone is not enough to influence people to just buy your tokens, because for example, there are a lot of limited edition things around, but it might not be worthy because although it's scarce, it just doesn't have value. So scarcity is just one aspect of influence, it's not everything. And lastly, commitment and consistency. When Bitcoin prices fell on 16th March 2020, the community was selling Bitcoin hard on Twitter and Reddit. It's interesting because these people have quite some Bitcoin in their portfolio, and they need to pump the prices up and they need to continue asking everyone in the community to have faith in Bitcoin so that Bitcoin is worth something. Whatever it is, whether they're right or wrong, They're consistent in their message and truly committed in shilling of Bitcoin. So that's good. It influences people, and Bitcoin prices actually went up.
In conclusion, many design of crypto systems fail even with the most beautiful mathematical formula because they miss out a lot on behavioral economics. They miss out on the system 2. You can have the layer 2. You can have the most beautiful layer 1 with beautiful design of mathematical formula, but if you don't combine them with layer 2 and understand how people behave and how people react to your formulas, it's bound to fail.
So before we end, once again, I like to talk about 3 discussion takeaways worth pondering. And when you have answers or comments, or you want to have discussions, just put them in the comments below or record a video and tag me in it. And I would really love to chat about it.
Do you think designers need to abide by some form of regulations or ethical, moral obligations to ensure how systems are designed? You realize that systems designers have so much power in influencing how people behave. Just like how Facebook designers, the UI UX designers of Facebook, have so much power in affecting how often we use Facebook, affecting how much attention they're taking away from us, and affecting how we behave when we are on our phones. So do you think that designers just have the moral obligation, and do you think there's a government or regulatory body that can come in to enforce this regulation? 2. Doesn't behavioral economics show a very depressing view of human nature? And 3. How can we use good design for good purposes? I know a lot of these that I've been explaining is using it for a very negative thing, but think about how we can use good design for a good purpose. At the end of the day, the whole point of design is to push people towards an outcome that we want. And if this outcome is a good outcome, then it is alright to push them towards that. For example, a good outcome could be people exercising more. So when they exercise, we record the data, and they will own the data, but we get to use the data, and then when we use the data, we are repaying them in tokens. And this token can be used to be spent on everything else. Maybe on Spotify, so that you can be listening to Spotify and running. So how can when we think of design, we think of behavioral economics. Don't just think of how you can scam people, how you can cheat people. No, that's not the way we want to go. The way we want to go is, how can we use this for a greater good? How can we use this to nudge people towards a common good, or a greater good that we can all strive towards? Think about that. Leave your comments below anywhere you want, or just record your comments, tag me in it, and I'll be really excited to get started on our discussion. Till then, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!